Hello there! Are you just feeling so hungry and thirsty and tired, like you've been wandering around the desert for years and you just want to leave? Well, watch the following video, like or subscribe, and peace. Hello there, my name is Billy Juliana. I'm 49 years old. I have a 40-year history of dealing with anorexia nervosa, and I'm currently following the recovery methods espoused by Tabitha Farrar, Kayla Rose Katecki, and Elisa Ores. And from my intro, you can see that I have something to say about a desert, but I'll get to that in a minute. Before I do, though, I want to just acknowledge that we are living in heightened times of anxiety. And yes, I've mentioned this before, but I just want to go over it again because a lot of us are feeling increased worry and increased sadness and loss and overwhelmed on the whole. So I understand that. And yet, anorexia recovery remains the #1 priority because ultimately, if I want to survive this crazy time that I'm living in, then I need to eat to full mental and physical satiety, and I need to rest myself as much as I can through it. Because we are part of that vulnerable portion of society that could have very dire consequences from this virus. So if I want to survive, I need to shore up my strength. And also, if I want to help others, then I gotta have the energy and the strength in which to do that. Because if I'm sitting there hyper-focused on my eating disorder and really wedded to the eating disorder ways, ultimately, I'm not going to be of service to anyone. So if there's a future beyond this time that we are in, I want to be in that future. I want to survive this time. And I also would like to be there without an eating disorder attached. That'd be really nice. So it remains my #1 priority to eat to full mental and physical satiety and rest. And if I can give that message to you, I would love to. If you take nothing else away from this video, if you just click it off right now, please just hear it as an exhortation to go eat and rest to full mental and physical satiety. It is in your best interests. All right, so having said that, I'm going to jump to my desert story. And it takes a while to get there, so bear with me while I try to get there. But yeah, we've been living in really heightened, crazy times of stress and worry and anxiety. And I've heard a lot of news on the radio about viruses and virology and epidemiology and mutations and immunization and inoculation and all of these things. And all of this stuff is kind of whizzing around my head. And I'm like, science. And I'm thinking science. And I'm like, gosh, I have the ultimate respect for people who are in the science field, who are in labs, who are working on stuff, and the medical community who are helping people get through this crisis. Ultimate respect for all of these people. And so I was thinking about science the other day and all that's going on right now. And I was like, gee, I wish I knew more about science because I don't. And science is just not my strong suit. And then all of a sudden, this memory popped up of an experiment I undertook when I was a junior in high school. That means in 1986 when I was 16 years old. And this experiment and the whole idea behind it, I realized it was a metaphor for recovery. And so I was like, wow, well, I think I'll talk about this in a video. And so that's what I'm going to do. So we still have yet a few steps to take to get to the desert. Hold on here. So basically in high school in the US, now and back then, we have 4 years of high school, and each year you take a science discipline. At least we did at my high school. And so, for example, freshman year at my high school, when I was 14 years old, I took biology. That was the first discipline we took. And that year culminated in the dissection of a frog. And also for me personally, that year culminated in my realization that I would never be a doctor. And if you just put those two statements together, you understand that the dissection didn't go very well for me. Just put it that way. So there's biology. Okay, done with that. Sophomore year, when I was 15, I don't even remember what we took. So obviously I don't remember anything I learned either. So whoops, okay, there goes that science. But then we get to junior year, and junior year I was taking an advanced placement chemistry class. Now, I was taking an advanced placement version of it, and that means basically that if I take this course and learn the chemistry, I also have to take an exam that is administered nationally at the end of the year. And if I do well enough on the exam, I can get college credit with the score that I get in the exam. So that was kind of appealing to me, because I was like, if I can get any credit for any sciences, then I will try to go ahead and do that now. And so I was taking advanced placement chemistry. But let me tell you, chemistry is worse for me than biology. It's so minute. It's just, everything's just on this like teeny level, and you can't even see it in a microscope, not the equipment we had. And then you just are imagining all this stuff. You're imagining atoms, and you're imagining protons and neutrons and shells and electrons and things flying off, and combinations of elements coming together and forming other things, and explosions. And you've got a lab, and you've got Bunsen burners, and you've got toxic chemicals. And basically, you got me not liking chemistry. So, I didn't really like this class. Now, that said, our teacher that year was encouraging the students later in the year to go ahead and do some extracurricular scientific work, because that would look really good on our high school resumes. Because basically we're all trying to do well in high school so that we can present a nice, good-looking resume to the colleges we apply to say, can I matriculate here? And so anything extra that we can put on that high school resume is only going to help the college admissions process. At least that's the thinking. So she suggested this extracurricular thing that was going on. Now, Vanderbilt University in Nashville was offering projects like this for kids outside of high school, outside of class, to do experiments one-on-one with individual professors from Vanderbilt University. So I don't know how we got assigned, but I think it was randomly, because I did not choose the discipline that I got stuck with, because the discipline I got stuck with was biochemistry. So yes, I did opt for this extracurricular scientific experiment option. I did go for that, and I got assigned to a professor of biochemistry. Great. Can you believe it? Like the two sciences that I cannot do the most stuck together. So anyway, I have to go and see this professor after school. This is how it worked. So after school finished for the day, then I would get myself over to Vanderbilt University campus and make my way there into the campus and meet with the professor in his office and in his lab. And let me just tell you something. I don't like labs. They remind me of gyms. They're full of weird equipment. They are in this confined space with this weird lighting, and they smell funny. And so this is how I equate a lab to a gym, and I don't like either one, because I am always entering one or the other at an energy level that is beyond the work that has to be done in the space. And so that's exactly what was going on for me entering that lab at Vanderbilt. I was coming from school, and I hadn't fed myself well during school. So I'm pretty hungry, and I'm really tired, and I'm schlepping my way across over to Vanderbilt campus and going into the stinky lab to deal with this biochemistry experiment. So here's where we get to the desert. My professor was studying specifically a certain kind of plant that is native to the southwestern United States and Mexico as well. It is called a resurrection plant. And I know that sounds kind of interesting given the time of year it is. I'm not promoting any kind of religion. It's just a coincidence that I happen to think of this memory, and this plant has the term that it has. Again, I'm not promoting any kind of religion or anything, but I do think it's interesting that this plant just happens to be called the resurrection plant. Now, that is how it's known colloquially. I think it's also known as the Rose of Jericho. It has some other names as well, but it has a scientific name, which I'm going to put up on the screen. Okay, so that's the scientific name, but we knew it as the resurrection plant. And the fascinating thing for me and the professor both about this plant is that in the desert, it looks like a tumbleweed. It looks like a bunch of dead weeds that have gotten entangled and ensnarled and are just blown around. However, the plant itself actually has a root system on it. So if you look closely at it, it has like these leathery roots that are on the dried out weeds that are kind of all entangled in this ball. So it's actually alive. And so you can take that thing from the desert and dunk it in water, and in the space of a few hours, it opens up into this beautiful saucer-shaped, verdant green plant. It's actually very beautiful. Like the leaves just kind of spiral out into this open, beautiful plant. And so it's just a fascinating thing. So while biochemistry sounds daunting to me, this plant was kind of cool. And so my professor's study was, one of his studies actually, was to take a strain of the plant while it's in its nourished state, while it's open, and study the metabolic rate of the plant. Now, I know this sounds so ironic given what we know about metabolism and nourishment and stuff like that today, but that's what he was studying, because the plant could live in this desiccated state for years. It would just live looking like it was dead for years, and then you would dunk it in water and then it would open up. It was just really fascinating. So he was wanting to study what was going on metabolically with the plant when you gave it water. And of course, the water wasn't all that the plant was needing to get into this verdant state. The plant, when it's in the desiccated state, synthesizes its own sugar in a crystalline state, and the sugar is called trehalose. Not that y'all need to know that, but it's sugar. That's what you need to know. So it makes its own sugar, and so basically it's feeding itself while it's in the desiccated state, but once you give it a full-on dunk of water, the sugar dissolves, and then that sparks all of the metabolic workings of the plant as well as photosynthesis so that the thing lives. It's pretty amazing. So my duty was to take a strain of the plant and then run it through all these different tests and come up with a metabolic reading at the end. And so the professor worked with me some on this, but for the most part, he left me alone after he gave me the basic steps. And so I would go into the lab after school in my tired state and do the work and run things through a centrifuge and put chemicals in a jar and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, when we ran the final assay, the number came out negative. And Professor Eichmeyer, that was his name, Dr. Eichmeyer, he kind of looked at me and he was like, we can run the assay again because that was a completely wrong reading. We were looking for something above zero. We were looking for something on the positive end, not on the negative. So where did I go wrong? Well, my theory is now that I was dragging myself into the lab and doing this work to the best of my ability, but I'm just not functioning on all cylinders. And so what comes out of it? Negativity. That's just one way to look at it. Now, the metaphor here with regard to the plant, though, go with your first instinct on that. The first instinct is you come from a desiccated place and you dunk yourself in nourishment and you bloom. Period. Okay? Go with your first instinct. That's the metaphor to run with metaphorically on this. We've got lots of metaphors popping around here, but we need all the help we can get. So you just take the plant that has been sitting there for years in this dried up state, trying to take care of itself the best way it knew how. You dunk it in the water and it blossoms. Now, I know that some of our eating disorders can hijack this whole situation and turn it around to an eating disorder benefit. And here's how mine does. All right. Oh, wow. This plant, it can live for years in this dried up state. Wow. Now, sometimes it needs water and it'll kind of blossom, and then it can go back into the dried up state for years and just go back and forth and back and forth, mostly in the dried up state, because if you do this too much, the plant will die. So you have to be mostly in the dried up state, then just get water and then go back to the dried up state. Now, I want to say that the plant will actually thrive for a long, long time in water. But because it doesn't have water in the environment it's in, it's, through time and evolution, it's created this way to stay alive. But my eating disorder is thinking, oh, how interesting. I can do that too. And then the other thing my eating disorder is thinking is that other people think this is interesting. They think this is really cool. So much so that they are studying it in the lab. We are like neat little specimen. Oh, isn't that interesting? I have made myself a curiosity to the entire world by my capabilities of living in this state. And I want to just say that my eating disorder is a bunch of hooey. This is so stupid. Who wants to live in a desiccated state? Now, this plant is adapted to its environment, but at the end of the day, we are not plants and we are human beings, and we were not meant to live in the desert without resources. No, sorry. Now, I personally voluntarily walked into the desert at a very young age because I was a little overwhelmed with the world around me as it was. So I was like, I'll scoot off over here. But I ended up in the desert, and I was only halfway living in this desiccated state for all this time. And the thing is that I'm a human being. Like I said, I'm not a plant. So I can come over here to a place where I can feed myself, not necessarily just dive right back into this world that I felt was so overwhelming. I can just feed myself. And then little by little, I can introduce myself back into the world. But first comes that food. First comes dunking myself into that water so that I can open up. And then I can engage with the world. But little by little, it doesn't have to be like, boom, here I am in the world. What can I do? Where am I going? I'm going to do something fantastic. No, just little by little, make strides. But the first thing is to dunk myself in nourishment and rest. You know that plant, it doesn't do exercise or jumping jacks when it's in the water. So that's basically all the things that I'm taking from this scenario. Number one is I'm no good as a starved person trying to do anything of value. I just failed at that experiment. And in part, it had to do with the fact that I was starving, in large part. Second, you know what? We have lived in this desiccated state for a while, and it's necessary for us to immerse ourselves 100% in food and just rest there, and then we open up and we blossom. And third is, we're not plants. We were never meant to live in the desert in the first place. So we need to open up and blossom and hang out here, and then introduce ourselves to the world at our own pace. So having said that, I think I'll let you go and rest yourselves. So please eat unrestrictedly. Do get some rest. Please don't worry about your body weight. Your body will take you to an optimal place health-wise. And in these very turbulent days, please take care. And until next time, peace.